All right, back again. I don't know how we got him. Rusty Mansell on 3 DawgsHQ.
Easy get, man. Anytime I'm in Nashville, I'm like, I'll swing by. But it's awesome to be back, man. Every time I come in here, this freaking place is another building got thrown up.
Yeah. Well, you're from the steel mill all the way to
Yeah.
Pearl Jam now.
Pearl Jam. Yeah, I'm in town I got some meetings, but when I found out Pearl Jam was here, that made it an easy, like, hey, little nudge, like, let's check out Pearl Jam.
So, and you just saw him the other day.
Saw him last week, yeah, in Atlanta, and I've seen Pearl Jam. You know, I've been a fan of Pearl Jam since the early '90s.
Really?
I got a huge, I would say, music catalog. You know, I'm Tupac, Run DMC, but I'm also, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots.
Oh, wow.
Country music. You know, I love all brands of music, but Pearl Jam, I would say, is one of my top 3 or 4 bands of all time.
What's your favorite Pearl Jam song?
You could easily say Yellow Ledbetter just because, but I think the whole 10 album is so good. Like I was listening on the way up here, you listen to, Why Go Home, Release Me, just this kind of side B, you know what I mean?
The
other side of the hit records. But I saw him last week. I could not believe how good of energy he still has. Like he is all over the place. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. This guy didn't leave the stage.
Right.
Incredible.
I saw him, the only time I've seen him was at Bonnaroo. And I swear he must have been like hammered drunk because in between the songs, he would talk to the crowd and I couldn't understand a lick of what he was saying. It was mumbling. It was, nothing. Then when he'd sing, it was perfect. It was beautiful. I was like, man, he's a pro.
I saw him, I think, in 98 in Atlanta, 99, 98, around there. And he was in the middle of a song. And I'm kind of, back then I had money for reserve seats. I'm lone seat guy then. And I remember this big figure walking on the stage in the middle of a song. And you think, well, that's a big ass dude. Yeah, it was Dennis Rodman.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Rodman just walks up on stage and puts his arm around him, hugs him. I'm like, I didn't realize how big Dennis Rodman was until then, but that was a cool moment.
Yeah. Well, it's been a big week now, I guess, for a lot of dogs here in Nashville because of Jared Curtis just committed. What does that mean for Georgia?
Well, I think it means a lot. The momentum of getting that. Specifically talk about Mike Bobo, and Mike Bobo offered this kid in January of 2023. So he's 2.5 years into this kid.
Yeah.
I talked about this week on several podcasts. So he threw for Georgia in June of 2022 at the end of his freshman year. And think about this. You're a freshman kid, and you enter the room, you go to camp, and they pull you to the side. You throw for Todd Monken. You throw for Buster Faulkner, who's offense coordinator at Georgia Tech, and you throw for Mike Bobo, who's the off-the-field quarterback assistant at the time. And all 3 of those guys really liked him. You kind of jump on the map at that point. But when Bobo took over in January of 2023, he was up here pretty quickly, and he left that morning and go, you got an offer from Georgia. And I think the way that it was handled when he decommitted in October, the communication between the family, from my understanding, talking to his family, Mike Bobo said, then I don't care if you're committed or not. Like, I'm not letting up on you. And I think that meant a lot to them, and ultimately got him.
And what does that say? Because to my knowledge, you would know better than I, that he had more money on the table to go to Oregon.
There's a lot with that. And I, there's people throw around all those numbers. Let me just say, it probably wasn't a cheap deal.
Yeah.
If I never got the impression it was the highest bidder. It's those teams that are behind that throw that number. Do you really want to do that? Or, obviously in this day and age with rev share, this guy's got an agent. This guy's got marketing people around him. I mean, he's the number 1 quarterback in the country for most people.
Right.
And if it was my son, I'd do the same thing. There's no education for that. I want my kid protected. So there was a lot of discussions that went on. I don't know that it was a discount. I would be fairly certain saying that Georgia wasn't the highest bidder. But when you go to Georgia, kind of the attraction there is you're going to be surrounded by a lot of good people. You're going to be playing in a lot of good games. You got a chance to win a national championship. Got a chance to be on the national stage. And I think Jared Curtis and his family trusted that. And to be honest with you, man, Mike Bobo, he didn't let up, man. And that was a big deal for him getting him.
Yeah. And, I think it's easy for guys like you and I to sit here and say, well, they should do this, they should do that. Because we never had those offers.
Yeah.
Not even at that age.
A lot of people are like, yeah, well, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, you would. You don't really know what you would do. You know what I mean? So I feel certain that wasn't a huge discount. I also feel certain I don't think Georgia was the highest bidder.
Right.
But you know, you don't get those because Jared Curtis liked the tutoring sessions. I can assure you that.
Right. But at the same time, he can look at someone like Arch Manning, which to my understanding, you know, what I mean, it's obvious with all the commercials, he's making a ton, but it's my understanding that Texas is paying him nothing.
Georgia didn't pay Brock Bowers anything either, very
Yeah.
much. He was those are true NIL kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think Jared Curtis is going to have that opportunity. He's going to have that market. But you know, to the true NIL value, Arch Manning had that from day one. Like
Yeah.
if they wanted to make that thing wild as they wanted to, and that's different. That's a different family coming in, but they've certainly handled Arch Manning well. I think so. Now it's time for him to play, and now you see them now that he's the starter. He's starting to sign all these endorsement stuffs, and that's kind of what they wanted him to do. You be the guy first. I think Jared Curtis is going to have some opportunities. You take a kid like KJ Bolden, who came to Georgia. I'm positive that Georgia wasn't the highest bidder on him.
Mm-hmm.
The long game with him was come here, you play. He did that. He started as a freshman. He's an incredible kid, very, just well-spoken young man. And he's about to do some really big NIL stuff. I'm not getting his business, but, you know, the true NIL part of it, Kirby Smart's like, you come here, we're going to pay you this amount. You play, you do what you think you're going to do as a freshman, and it's going to come to you. You know, a year later, KJ Bolden is probably making up anything that he left on the table already at Georgia.
Right, and not trying to be disrespectful to Oregon, because you can, you know, Marcus Mariota was a pretty big deal, but I think there's a lot more money to be made in the SEC, particularly at a school like Georgia and Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, perhaps with.
To be honest with you, I think the biggest thing that hurts Oregon is location.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, people I know that go, and Dan Lanning is a hell of a dude now. I know Dan is a freaking great dude. And they recruited this kid hard. Like, they were all in on Jared Curtis. They have the Nike brand behind them. I don't care what amount of money they do. Everybody says their facilities are crazy. If you think about Jared Curtis and his family, and you think about his mom and dad, and who are firmly entrenched here, and you know, you got a grandchild, a first grandchild, and you think about 6 Fridays every football season. You got to jump on a plane from Nashville. You got to fly to Portland. Then you got to, you know, car, hour and a half, 2 hours to Eugene, you know, and you think about doing that 6, 7 times a year, and then 3 or 4 times a year to even go see your kid. There's a lot with that logistics part, but I'm certain that Oregon can hold its own with anybody as far as the NIL space, the marketing. And them playing in the Big Ten now, they got big games on you know, they're probably saying, look, we're going to be over there 3 or 4 times. I just think the people I've talked to that didn't end up there was like, man, that's a long way. And then when you land, I think it's about 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot on you.
Yeah, I've made the trip to Eugene, and I liked it. But same thing, had to fly into Portland, and then I had to fly on one of those. I didn't even know they still had those planes with the propeller. Like, that's legit the only flight they had to get there.
So that's one of the things. I talked to a guy that was at Oregon at one point. He said the 2 things that we face are the kids come from East Coast, and he goes, when you're a staff member there, you don't recruit there's no D1s in Oregon. So every time you go to recruit a kid, every time you go on a visit, you're on a plane. So there's a lot to the man hours of doing that. But, you know, as far as the product, it's a national brand. Dan's a hell of a coach, good person, and they made it hard on Jared Curtis in Georgia. They made it real hard. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I think the trust, the consistency of Georgia and location really won out.
All right, well, let me put you on the spot here then.
Oh, boy.
Because I don't know if you remember this, but obviously we had you in here 2 years ago, and we were talking about Glenn Schumann. And you said, man, that guy, future head coach.
Yep, still is.
So Florida or Alabama, let's say either one's open, and they're targeting Dan Lanning or they're targeting Glenn Schumann. Which one do you think would be a bigger threat to Georgia? Let's say if they go to Alabama, Kalen DeBoer flames out.
Well, I think if saying a bigger threat to Georgia, I would think Dan Lanning just because he has experience. You know what I mean right now. I think Glenn Schumann is being very picky, you know, about jobs. And I was interested if he got that North Carolina job. From everything I heard on the outside, they reached out to him and said, are you interested? And he said, certainly would like to maybe talk, you know. And I just know that he is being really picky. And the background on Glenn Schumann was He was a student, didn't play college football. He was a student assistant at Alabama. Well, he got promoted kind of into Kirby Smart's room. So he was with Kirby Smart every day. He watched Kirby make those decisions and what jobs not to take. That's Kirby's business, but there were other jobs that Kirby didn't take. There were head jobs that he got offered, he did not take. And one of his days, those things will get out here. So I'm not going to get in his business on that. But there were jobs he turned down, which are Power 4 jobs. But Glenn Schumann, I think, sat back and watched Kirby be real picky.
Right.
So I think Glenn Schumann's going to be real picky. And I'll be honest with you, man, a lot of assistants I talk to are not so much in a hurry anymore to jump in that seat. Because talking to Sam Pittman, the one thing he told me was, Rusty, there's no training for this. I watched Kirby at Georgia. I watched him make those phone calls. I watched him take those. What I didn't watch was him at home and constantly calling. I've said this, I think, on your podcast. The one thing about head coaches, you rarely get good news on your phone. It's bomb after bomb after bomb. Somebody didn't go to class. Somebody's late. Coach, we got to have you for this meeting. Coach, you got to call this kid. It's just so much on those guys. Really and truthfully, do you really want to sit in that seat when these guys are making $2 million a year as assistant? Maybe that's the route some of these guys want to stay. I do think Glenn Schumann will be a head coach at some point, but I think with the original question, the threat, I would think Dan Lanning at Alabama or Florida would be a pretty big thorn to deal with.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that too, because with these assistants now at the elite schools like a Georgia, they get paid like most head coaches anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like I go back to Buster Faulkner. He had a hell of a year at Southern Miss, and he told me, he said, Rusty, I couldn't really get an interview. So he came off the field, took a pay cut. He went to Georgia for 2 years and put that on his resume, and one of the hottest offensive coordinators in the country. Georgia Tech paid him and then paid him again. So getting to those staffs, putting that on your resume, those things are big for those guys.
Well, and then you mentioned Mike Bobo as well. Why do you think he catches so much hell? Because all he does is produce elite offenses.
It's been that way since college.
It's
been that way since college. You know what? He was the backup quarterback to Eric Zaire, so he was the next thing. He was really, and he came out his first year starting, and I believe it was a coaching change, and with Jim Donovan's first year, it didn't go great, and just things went well, and it kind of snowballed on him. I know that Mike Bobo at that point, he basically just shut everything down. Never went out again. Never did this. He locked in for his senior year. Had one of the best seasons ever by a Georgia quarterback. I think he was second team SEC. Peyton Manning was first team. 10-2 then. Outback Bowl MVP. Beat Florida. And really and truthfully, it's just been one of those love-hate things. You know what I mean? And it's really strange for a guy that's given everything to Georgia. Like, he's given, emotionally, physically, mentally. This guy played there, blood, sweat, and tears. His son, by the way, Drew Bobo, is Drew Bobo is an NFL guy. I mean, he's a great center. I mean, this guy, I think Georgia fans kind of know now, but Drew Bobo is a hell of a football player. It's crazy because, he was playing Saturday morning high school football in Colorado. And then he moves to South Carolina, plays 1 year there, kind of gets a little bit. Then he moves to Auburn with his dad, plays at Auburn High School, has a good year. And most people thought, man, they're just signing this guy because it's Mike Bobo's son, And he comes to Georgia and puts his nose down, the grind gets bigger. And when Jared Wilson goes down this year, they had to put him in quickly and never really missed a beat. And everybody I talked to around the program, a lot of people, they're like, man, Drew Bobo, thank God he got his mom's ankles and not his dad's. But he's a guy that, if it was Drew Smith, people should be excited. But he's got Drew Bobo, and he is a hell of a football player.
Yeah. How much, going back to Mike Bobo, will his success rely on Gunnar Stockton and how good he is this year?
They're tied together. The relationship, that's Bobo's guy.
Yeah.
I mean, they've known each other. He's known Gunnar since he was 5 or 6 years old.
Committed at South Carolina, right?
With Mike, and when Mike left South Carolina, he decommitted, and Georgia was his dream school. His sister's named Georgia, so Gunner's a Bulldog, but he was also a Bobo guy. So I think there's a lot to this, and you can say everything you want. My argument on Mike Bobo is when he had pieces 2023 with Carson Beck, Lab McConkey, Brock Bowers, and all those guys, they were balling. It was one of the best offenses Georgia's ever had. Period. 2024 was not the standard at Georgia. And I think Mike Bobo would tell you that. I think Kirby Smart would tell you that. I think everybody there would tell you that. For whatever reason, I think Kirby Smart went out and spent some money on some wide receivers and tried to get that room corrected. They got Gunnar Stockton. And interesting, we'll talk more about quarterbacks, but Ryan Puglisi's a kid that a lot of people ask me about. And I think the fact that Georgia tried to get a portal quarterback in January twice, but this window after spring practice, they didn't do that. They didn't try that. So it tells me, I think, with Gunnar and Puglisi, they feel comfortable there.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way that it's an upgrade? Maybe not overall talent-wise compared to Carson Beck. I know it's popular to pile on him, but I mean he was such a gifted arm talent. But could Georgia offense be better even if the quarterback is maybe?
I think energy-wise,
yeah,
Gunnar's a different player.
Yeah,
Gunnar's a guy that Carson I think lived by himself. That's his choice. Gunnar lives with 4 football players. And Gunner's a guy that you see him. I think people see the aw shucks and little country kid and all that. I've been around him. I've been around him a long time. I mean, this guy would drop an MF on you. Like, I'm sorry if his mom sees this. He's got that about him. And I think you see Tate Ratledge talk about. He said when he came in the Texas game, it immediately changed things. And he runs over a guy like the second play on the sidelines, and he gets up and kind of has some words with that Texas guy, and then he gets freaking KO'd on the goal line. Like, dude's out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But to show his tenacity, kind of, he plays, like Nick Chubb, kind of like the respect. My teammates respect me. I think people are excited. So I don't want to get into the Carson versus Gunnar. I think it's a different type of energy that Gunnar brings. That's his strength, is making people around you better and wanting to fight your ass off for him.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you got me thinking about that Texas, how they played twice. What level of big boy football was that last year? Was Texas equal to Georgia, you think, just looking at them?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I think just my personal opinion, I think Georgia was tougher than Texas.
Yeah.
I think if Steve Sarkisian were to sit in this table, he'd tell you we got to be more physical. I think Georgia prides himself. They want to play in the phone booth. You want to get in there and you want to throw blows with Georgia, that's exactly how they want to play. Ole Miss was fast-paced, walked right into that storm over there, and they got their ass whipped in Oxford. But you want to get in a phone booth and fight a Georgia team, and Kirby Smart wants to run the damn clock. You let that man get up 13-0 on you, he'll sit on it. Like, he will choke the clock to death. You know what I mean? It drives people nuts sometimes. But, they'll get in a phone booth and fight with you. The physicality, that comes from Alabama. That comes from Nick Saban. Kirby's that way, intense. You talk about the Bloody Tuesdays. And, you talk about people. And Kirby encourages players to come to Georgia to watch that practice. Like, if you don't like some cuss words and physicality, that's not the place for you. You know what I mean? They're not going to put their arm around you and tell you how many balls you're going to catch. You better strap your mouthpiece up, and you better block that damn safety, or that microphone is going to be on you. I've interviewed so many Georgia players. I interviewed Dalen Everett, who's probably their best defensive back this year. He said his freshman year, he got yelled at so loud one day, he didn't know he was talking about him. He said he got back to the back of the huddle and goes, he's talking about you. He's like, what? He's talking about me? It was like, just got his head down, but you got to get used to those type of things. They want to be coached hard. And I think the NFL, when you hear those GMs talk about Georgia players are coachable and they're ready, because they know that in Georgia, those guys are pushed to the limit. And if you can handle that adversity, you're going to be able to handle on Sundays.
Yeah, and I mean, all the success they've had in college, I mean, it's
know how to win.
The Eagles winning, I'm sure helped them just as much.
Value of a Georgia player. I don't even know, this past draft, all the guys that went. I'm telling you, I would be willing to say there were maybe two players that were drafted because they were probably like, you know what, that guy's from Georgia. Let's just take him. Mm-hmm. We know what we're getting with him. I think the value of the Georgia players off of that Philadelphia Super Bowl and the kind of the exposure they got with that was definitely helped Georgia.
Yeah, and I'm a Green Bay fan, so I could tell you. I mean,
ton
they
of
take
them.
3
Quay Walker, Devontae
Georgia
White,
defenders every draft.
Eric Stokes. They just did it with Nas Stackhouse and those guys, I think. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, which game do you think will be tougher for Georgia next year, though? Alabama, which is always
They got
a
to
war?
me, it's Alabama. Like
More than Texas?
yeah, you got to beat Alabama. That's
Yeah.
the one. Like Texas might have a better team, but Georgia beat them twice last year, and I'm sure Texas is going to be pissed off and fired up and ready to play. But you look at Alabama, and that's the game that you have to win. You have to show you can win that side of that game. And the way that game ended, the way it started, the way it ended, you're like, what's it going to take to win that game? And to me, everybody wants to talk about all the other games. Georgia's done everything. They've won SEC championships. They've won national championships. They got to beat Alabama, and they got to beat them again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like there's a lot of programs in this conference where like Florida, Tennessee.
Yep.
It's in their head at this point. I think it's fair to say Alabama's in Georgia's head a little.
They should play with extreme confidence. They beat them until you beat them. This Georgia Tennessee, the flip side of it. Georgia's got the best of that rivalry right now, and until Tennessee beats Georgia, Georgia's going to know, hey, we're supposed to beat this team, and we're going to do it again. It takes one of those losses to kind of get that squared up a little bit, and Georgia's certainly on the other side of that right now with Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you don't have to mention any names or anything, but now that we're in this NIL portal world, what's the craziest story that you've heard in recruiting? Doesn't even have to be related to Georgia, but is there
the most disappointing things I hear are I would say parents or people in people's circle getting in their money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's just there's a million things that's you could discuss about NIL. And I've said this a lot. I've been to kids' houses that I was worried about walking on the floor. And there's kids that jerseys were being sold. So don't tell me those kids don't deserve some money and deserve some income, and I'm all for that. But when you start handing an untrained 18, 19-year-old kid $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, he doesn't want to disappoint some people around him. I sat with a guy one time, and I can say it. I was with Nick Chubb, and we were sitting with a businessman, and I wanted to introduce Nick. I said, Nick, this guy doesn't need anything to you. This guy doesn't need anything from you. It was funny because I told the guy, I said, Nick, don't talk. Nick does not talk. Okay, Nick was Nick was going to NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Nick doesn't talk. I said, you got an hour with this guy. I'm gonna cut you off, and Nick's going home, and I'm going home. But we went to dinner, and this guy's ultra successful, sold a business for hundreds, millions of dollars. The one thing I left there that night, two things. Nick Chubb didn't shut up. He asked him a million questions. The side I didn't know Nick had, he asked him a million questions, which I was like, okay, we're going to be here longer than an hour because Nick's dug into this guy.
Right.
But the one thing he told Nick, he said, never apologize for being successful. You made that. You earned that, and you learn how to say no. You learn how to say no, and I will never forget that. And I know that Nick, I found out later that Nick brought like Sony Michel and a couple of those guys to meet that guy, to sit down with that guy. And that I'll never forget that. And Nick was out of college at this point. Some of these guys don't know how to say no. So you're trying to make everybody happy, and that worries me on that part. But there's we can talk about Nico. I mean, that's we can bring that up. You start talking about this, and I'm on the outside looking in at that situation, but I think about the bigger picture with that decision. And my question on that is how it was handled at the end, because obviously he was getting paid a lot of money from Tennessee. Obviously, I think that Tennessee tried to put that fire out in December. There was probably some discussions there. Whatever happened, kind of verbally agreed to stay in. Well, the next case scenario, he knows that window's coming up, or people around him know that window is coming up. That last window that you're going to be able to tap. My problem with the way that was handled is you're a day before your spring game, and your teammates can't get in touch with you.
Mm-hmm.
The long term of that is, and this is me knowing as a 51-year-old man, you take an alumni base like Tennessee, and you take a fan base, and you do that to them, you take those 2.5 years of those people that would literally die for you, they're done with you.
Right.
They're done with you for life. You're not going to move to Nashville and call so-and-so and say, hey, I want to start a podcast. Can I rent that building from you? No, we have no, like you cut off an entire alumni and a fan base. That connection is lost for life. And I think about those long-term decisions. You know what I mean? I got one of my best friends who came to Georgia. I really want to say his name. I'm not going to do it to him. Very highly recruited. I would light him up, but my group text would kill me. But very highly rated player in the 90s, and comes to Georgia, and things didn't work out for him. You know what? And after 4 years, he just graduated and left. But he never, didn't show his, or do anything like that. He just went to Georgia. He played football, and he graduated, went home. He is an unbelievably successful in the medical sales world. Had he done Georgia that way, he got that job because he knew somebody that was a Georgia alum that set him up for an interview. You know what I mean? This guy wasn't a star, but he had that fan base. He had that alumni connection. He made that connection, and then he was able to get a job and has a great home, great family. And he did that because he had that fan base. He had that alumni association in behind him. Nico, you start making decisions on some of these kids are going to 3 and 4 schools. You're not meeting people. You're dining and dashing at these schools. It does no good to go to 4 schools in 5 years, because when basketball's done at 26, what are you going to do? You're going to call a guy that you met for 2 months?
Right.
It's pretty deep there. I like to think about the long term. I know Nico, that's a whole deal, but all I could think about was, kid, you just took one of the biggest alumni groups, passionate group, Tennessee fans. Dude, they're done with you, like for life.
Well, the worst part, I think, of that whole deal, whatever they were trying to get extra, let's say $2 million or whatever, let's just call it that. I don't know if that's true or not, but the whole plan from high school and everything up to this point was he was going to go pro after this year.
You're what, 10 months?
He's tanked that. Unless he goes to UCLA and scores 50 touchdowns, he's not going to go pro. And even if he does, I think he's hurt his stock. Now, do NFL people care about holdouts, stuff like that?
There would definitely be some questions there.
Right.
He's gonna answer for that in detail.
If he falls 3 spots in the draft, and that's like being very kind to him, that's $10 million.
If and it's a deep draft next year.
Right.
The quarterback is such a different deal, because if you think about, if just say you're a first rounder, you're the face of that franchise. You're the face of a city. Like Cam Ward's coming here, and he's the face of Nashville now.
Right.
The city. So you don't think they did their homework on him? So there's a lot to that, and I think if Nico leaves in December, it's kind of like people are pissed off, and it's kind of a bad look. But at least in Tennessee had time to do and say, okay, that was it. Let's move on. The day before the spring game, I'm going to tell you something. NFL people are going to say, look, man, you tell me you didn't quit on your kids? You didn't quit on your teammates? Because you're supposed to be at a 1 o'clock meeting the day before, and they can't even find you. He will answer for those questions. Now, he's got a chance to write it. He'll be able to have his own sample size at UCLA. But I don't think what Nico does on the field is going to be his question as much as what he does off the field, and how much people around him can influence him.
Right. Yeah, that was a tough deal. Well, speaking of tough deal, how about and again, I don't know how much you want to share or get into, but how big of a surprise was it when Justus Terry went to Texas?
Well,
because I'll tell you this real quick. I had, Bobby Burton?
Yeah, Bobby.
I had him in here, and that was right at the SEC championship game, right? So he went to cover Texas, obviously, and they said, "Oh, Justus Terry, it's an hour and a half away." He's like, "All right, I'll make the drive." He said he pulled into the parking lot. He thought he was going to Georgia, and he said, "Oh, it's Texas. It was a good thing I made that hour and a half drive or whatever it was." I mean, it stunned even him.
Bobby was the only Texas guy there.
Yeah,
that's a damn good move by Bobby. You know what?
But there's a lot of different kind of answers to that.
Yeah.
This is a kid that visited Georgia more than any prospect I've ever seen since the 8th grade. They recruited him as hard as you could possibly recruit him. And I think he went to Texas once, twice maybe. You're talking in 4.5 years. I would say at least 25 visits to Georgia.
Wow.
And went to Texas. So, was NIL involved? Yes, it was involved. I don't want to speculate on all the other things, but
Right.
that Texas closed really good there, really good player. And Georgia, that was a loss for them. That was a very deep class in state. Elijah Griffin, without question, left some money on the table for some other schools. Want to be a Bulldog. He is the best defensive lineman I've seen in Georgia since 2016 with Derek Brown. And Justus Terry is a hell of a player, don't get me wrong. But if I'm ranking one of the two, Elijah Griffin's the guy. Georgia would love to have had Justus Terry and him in the same class. Don't get me wrong. This guy's a 5-star too, but
Yeah.
it just didn't work out in the end.
What do you think of when you hear Texas may have a $35 to $40 million roster? And I don't know if you heard this, Rusty, but I've heard LSU secretly is right there with them.
If you've got the best thing that ever happened to Ohio State was Michigan winning a national championship.
Yeah.
They were not that did not set well.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I heard Ryan Day say, we didn't spend a bunch of money or we didn't go out and buy players. Yeah, you did in one way. Okay.
Mhm.
You got your juniors to come back. That's great. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. If you can talk Jack Sawyer and Travion Henderson and JT and all those guys that come back and you pay them like third rounders, which they were, that's exactly what you want to do. They did a great job. Then you get Caleb Downs in here. You get Will Howard, Quinshon Junkins. They played it perfect. And think about this. Ohio State was the alpha team, in my opinion, the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't have the playoffs, they wouldn't have made it.
Right.
Those two losses, they were out. They got hot. That's where you have to reprogram yourself as college football fans, and it's hard, especially for the Georgia fan base. 10-2 is okay as long as you're playing your best ball at the end of the year. Ohio State loses to Michigan again, which I couldn't believe. And then you look at that and go, 2 years ago, they don't make it again. What happens if they don't make it and they spent that money? You know what I mean?
They probably fired Ryan Day.
Who knows? But they won a national championship, and that's
Right.
that's different day and age. So you hear the 35 and 40 million. I think Texas desperately wants a national championship. Nobody can outspend Texas. So not that I know of, maybe Texas Tech, but a dollar amount wouldn't shock me if they did. You know what I mean? Like they're in here. Like they're in. The amount of portal D linemen. That's why I think Sark would say the physicality, because Georgia kind of whipped their defensive line, and then Jalen Walker and Michael Williams kind of had their way with those the interior guys there. They got after them up front, and where did they spend their money? On D linemen. And then Justus Terry was there, and they went and got him, and they went and got guys in the portal. So I think Texas knows we can have all this skill in the world. We can have all these good-looking DBs, we can have all these good-looking wide receivers, and we can have these first-round running backs and all this other stuff. If we can't get into the phone booth with somebody like Georgia, we're never getting over the hump.
Mm-hmm. And did you see what I know Fran Brown? Did you see what he said about his lineman that went to Texas?
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise you, you know what I mean?
No. This is the way it is. Until we get some type of regulations, that's another 3-hour podcast. Who knows what's going to happen? But listen, Fran is, there's no BS with Fran. There's no filter with Fran. He's going to tell you what he thinks. I've had a lot of conversations with Fran Brown. He is awesome, great guy. But he certainly he probably knows, and then he loses his wide receiver to too. So
is there a fine line though for a program like Georgia where I'm not naive. I know they're spending too, but not maybe $40 million. Is there a fine line of, how much you pay and how much you want to be here?
You only got what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah. You only got what you got. So I think, it's just, to me, I go back to Michigan winning and what Ohio State is like, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
We can't do this. Texas, to me, is that next team that is desperate for a national championship. So you start talking about monster salaries and monster rosters, wouldn't shock me to see that. I mean, they've been this close and, got handled and got beat. So to me, I don't know this $40 million,
Right.
but I guarantee you, if we were able to really get our hands on books, I couldn't see anybody outspending Texas on this particular team. And they're getting a discount with Arch Manning,
Right.
because he's getting NIL money. He's not on the books so much.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
It's almost having like that quarterback rookie salary cap in NFL, like Jaden Daniels. You got to win when Jaden Daniels has got a rookie contract. You better win while Arch Manning's making NIL money, because the next quarterback isn't a Manning. The next quarterback is, a real human. This doesn't have that background and stuff. So
right, yeah, and it's almost like Alabama's won so much. Saban had to get in front. He got so mad at Jimbo.
the AD,
right? I mean, yeah, he's out there.
We got to have money.
His can with his coins in it. Give us some money.
We're not going to be able to eat dinner or not if you don't give us some change over here.
So
that's why I think it's. Did you see The Athletic said, ESPN's willing to pay for a 9th game? I mean, I don't think there's any way they don't do that if they can get a penny more, and apparently they're going to get close to $80 million more annually. It's to me, it's a foregone conclusion, because they're going to take that money.
It's going to happen at some point, but you also
have got to get the protection of your teams.
Yeah.
Because you and I both are SEC fans, all right? I don't care what you say. If you add an extra game against Ole Miss, if you add an extra game against Missouri, if you add an extra game against Texas A&M, you're going to get your ass beat up for another week, and you got to be able to protect your teams. If you take that 9th game, there better be some rules and stipulations that we're going to get 4 teams in that playoff.
Right.
Minimum. So there'll be some wiggle room there, but there's just no way they can't do 9 games at some point.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Kirby, does he favor a 9th game, do you think?
I would probably think not.
Yeah.
Well, Kirby's a little different because he's been dealing with SEC championship.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets that, like, you think about Georgia playing Georgia Tech 8 overtimes. 7 days later, they go getting a damn knockdown drag out with Texas in overtime. And then you start talking about portal and your kids, having to take finals, and then you turn right back around, buckle up, and you got Notre Dame. No excuse there, but I mean, like, Georgia went through some stuff. So if you tell Kirby, that UMass game, let's replace that with I think y'all going to play Arkansas in Fayetteville. You think he'd be in favor of that? Probably not.
Right. So I mean, they need. I know there's been conversations about doing something about that championship weekend, but I'm totally against it being like a free for all where everybody's got to play. But I would favor, like last year, instead of Georgia Texas, even though that turned out to be a great game, I would have much rather seen like Ole Miss Alabama, and the winner gets into the playoff. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot there. Just not having the divisions and all that kind of stuff. At some point it's going to be one of those people fighting over whether you got in that or not. And the Georgia was basically out of until Ole Miss lost to Florida. Georgia wouldn't have. Georgia fan base was like, we'll take that week off. We're good. They didn't even know they were about to play 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Georgia fans, and that happened, you're like, wait a minute. We might have a chance to play Texas here. And so that kind of popped up late.
What's your, I always ask you annually, you always got some nugget, whether it's, everybody's underrating Stetson Bennett, and then he's incredible. The following year, you said, watch the offensive line. They're being underrated. What's Rusty's nugget on this year's Georgia team that not enough people are talking about?
Well, I think the wide receiver room is really, really good, and they spent there. Not only their portal guys are good, their young guys are good. Like Talon Taylor, it's a 5-star from Illinois. He's a real deal. C.J. Wiley, really good. Noah Thomas, Texas A&M, 6'5" guy. Kobe Young coming back off that, 6'5". You look at Branch coming in. They really changed that room, and that's going to be something that Georgia's going to have to. That's the next step for them. That's the getting back step. They had Arian Smith, they had these guys, just a lot of inconsistent play there. I think what sneakily, if that's a word, intrigues me, is Dylan Bell playing running back. I think he's got a lot of Debo Samuel to him. He can play wide receiver. He wasn't an X. They tried to play him there for the better team. They can do so many things with Dylan Bell, and I think that if I'm Georgia, I'm excited about that because I think he wants to play wide receiver in the NFL. I think some NFL teams told him if you can do both, it's even better. And he's just a natural runner. Like, he has great vision. He's thick. He's 205 pounds. I think he can play running back. He's got great hands to play wide receiver. He can return kicks. Dylan Bell's that guy. You might be sitting here in December going, damn, Georgia had that guy this long, but he was having to play a position that wasn't natural to him because they didn't have the guys there.
Right.
I think Dylan Bell can be that guy this year.
Yeah, was it 2 years ago? He killed Tennessee.
Yes, sure did. I'm telling you, he can straight fly. The story on that was he was from a small, like Baptist school in Houston, like a real small school. He shows up at Georgia. He's on a field. He's over there with the Rusty Mansells.
He's not over there with the other guys. He's over there with the Mama Loves You kids. The story I was told was Will Muschamp calls up and goes, hey,
there's a kid over here from Houston that's just killing kids. We know anything about him? So Todd Monken was still there. He gets him over to the real field and works him out. He's like, wait a minute, we like this guy. And I think they brought him back the next week. Like, you a one-hit wonder, or can you do this again? They brought him back the second week, and then he commits to Georgia, and they hold on to him once everybody finds out who he is. This is a kid way under the radar. Then they find out he's a 10-4, 10-500 guy, and he's put together. And so that was a good recruiting, a good eval. A lot of people talk about Todd Monken was a wide receiver coach. That's his background. So his evals were spot on there. Mm-hmm. And Todd Monken, one of his last kind of here you goes was Dylan Bell.
You just made me think of something mentioning Will Muschamp. I think it was the Florida On 3 site. I should give him a shout out if I can remember who, but they said something about Muschamp going back to Florida to be defensive coordinator.
I heard that for a while. And, Billy Napier's got Jimmy Sexton. Will Muschamp has Jimmy Sexton, that whole circle. So if there was ever like some communication, like maybe Billy reached out and was like, you think Will would do this? And Jimmy may have called Will, and Will probably a day or so thought about it. But as far as I know, he is ramping everything down. Like I didn't even see him at spring practice at Georgia. His son's playing here in Nashville, Witt. And I think his priority right now is watching his son play. I grew up with Will. We've known each other a long time, and I would say I think I went 2-0. No, I think I went 2-1 against Will. But he lets me know that his senior year he was hurt.
And when I tell you he lets me know, it's hey MFer. You realize I was hurt that game. I didn't play you, so I don't get to count those games that he didn't play. But known Will a long time, intense guy, great guy,
super smart. Just off the field, but a highly intelligent football coach and. Great DB coach.
Any surprise that it didn't work out for him both times at Florida and South Carolina?
Coordinator hires was this offensive coordinator hires.
Yeah.
I think when he got Bobo was the guy that could have said it was too late. That it was too late that year for him. But I think Will would tell you probably the coordinator hires on that side of the ball. Even when you go back and look at the Florida teams on defense, they were first rounders.
Yeah.
They were freaking ballers. They couldn't get the offensive side right. So,
and then when McElwain replaced him, it was all the defense.
All the defense. All those guys got drafted. A lot of them first rounders, So, it's just the right people around you, right pieces. And Will probably tell you, wished he'd done some things different offensively, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
The one thing I always heard about Muschamp was, when he now they all have their different styles, but like when he would do his pressers, if he'd show more personality, the fans would like him more. And I just think of the Tennessee. Do you remember where he took Florida in there and he said, nothing better than making all these people sad. like that guy, if he would have displayed more of that, I think he would have been a little bit more popular with the fans.
I'll tell you something about Will. Dude is hilarious. People have, like Will Muschamp. If you had Will Muschamp unplugged, like I'm going to see Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam's best concert ever was unplugged. If you had Will Muschamp by the fire at the lake, just shooting it with him,
hilarious, unbelievable that side of it. But he's got that football guard, that coach guard. They keep that barrier up. Tell people, a lot of people about Kirby. Like he's a human. Mm-hmm. He goes days without cussing people. You know what I mean? This guy, he does a lot of nice things for people people don't know. And but those guys have a guard. That's how they keep their distance and separation from that. But Will is really fun. If Will ever did a podcast where he really let his guard down,
yeah. Oh, maybe that's an idea.
Right there, next time he's in Nashville, you need to get him in here, man. I'll see if I could nudge him a little bit easier.
Yeah,
but
that'd be great.
He's a good dude, hell of a recruiter, intense. Kids loved him. The defensive back
Freaking loved him at Georgia. I know that for sure.
Yeah. I think I've asked you this before. I'm just wondering if things have changed at all. How long do you think Kirby Smart keeps it going at Georgia?
I don't know. I just know this, that dude's built for like chaos. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to sit at the house and watch, Netflix.
Yeah.
He can't do it. He needs that constant kind of, right now, that's still in his wheelhouse. He loves coaching, lost his dad, heard some of those people that coached with his dad and some of the things they said about Kirby growing up, and I see kind of how he is now. I mean, he grew up in Fieldhouse when he was 5 years old. He was there every day, like every day. That's what he knows. And, very tight with his family. That's the one thing I'll say that people should know about Kirby. I think one of the best things about Kirby is when he goes home, he's completely engaged with his wife and his kids. And, of course, they're probably watching sports together, but the guy is present. You know what I mean? I know coaches that they're sitting in that room, but they're not there. Like, this guy's present with his family, and that I know that means a lot to them. They're a very tight circle.
You don't think at all that just the state kind of could burn him out? I mean,
it could. If things don't change, there are going to be a lot of coaching changes.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of coaches. I'm telling you, and this is not a Rusty Mansell Kirby Smart conversation. I talked to a lot of coaches. If things don't change the next 2 or 3 years, I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot of guys that are coaching on Saturdays that are either going to be on Sundays or they're going to be done with it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't operate like this. There's no rules. Looks like there'll be some things in place, but you cannot have a world where your team flips free agency twice a year. That's not even real world for anything. That's not real world for anything.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Is that because that's the biggest thing I hear from the coaches is the free agency twice a year. Is if they how much would it help if it was just once?
I think if I got to sit in a room right now, and this may not be the popular thing among coaches, but for me, I would say you have a 10-day window, and at the end of December, maybe from, maybe December. Most of the semifinals were on New Year's Eve, so I would say January the 2nd to January the 12th. The two teams that are playing in the finals, they have a love extension. You don't have to go take 10 visits. These kids know where they want to go. You have a window there, and you make your decision. Because most of these kids that go in have been tampered with. They know where they're going. Right. The only reason they don't end up at school A is because school B found out you were going in, and they're like, oh, we're getting that guy. So from what I understand, most of the schools have player meetings in early December. They know who's on the verge of leaving, and they also know who's redoing their contracts and those types of things. So just give me 10 days. Hell, everybody in corporate America would love to have a 10-day free agency. Like, you might can get a job on the street for 10 days here. You might get a raise. Give me 10 days. You know what I mean? And those type of things. The post-May, post-spring, that's the one that's just, let me tell you something. You get rid of that one and watch how many spring games come back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think if you're a graduate, you have earned the right to leave. That window's open. If you graduate in May and you got eligibility left, you ought to be able to go anywhere you want to go. You have earned that right. But as far as the free agency stuff, let that thing 10 days and let's open it up and be done. And you can go make your choice. If you do that with Nico, Tennessee knows in January that this guy's leaving, and we've got time to get another quarterback in place, and we got time to spend January, February, and part of March developing our next guy. So they're going to, Tennessee goes into winter conditioning. Hell, we're in year 3 with our guy. You think, we know what we've got. We know what we do well. Let's work on that. Now they're starting from scratch. Now Jake Merklinger, they bring in the App State kid. I love Jake Merklinger, but he's got to play. Mm-hmm. He's got to play to know what you got there.
And I think they really like George McIntyre too, but he's a true freshman.
True freshman.
It's going to be tough.
I mean, you think about week 3, Georgia, which is
another whole conversation. I think Jake Merklinger's mom went to Georgia. I mean, this kid he grew up a huge Georgia fan. He's a great kid, man. I mean, he's a freaking, like, Jake Merklinger is a freaking great guy. Good, is he ready for Georgia? I don't know.
And all the reports in spring were and this was before all the Nico stuff blew up, but all the reports were, man, he's taken a huge step, and he looks, to a lot of people, they said he looked as good as Nico this spring.
He is a wired correctly kid. Like we had him up here, I think, for Nashville on 3 Elite. I got a chance to watch him play Cedar Grove, who was the state champions. I did a game on TV. They absolutely beat the hell out of him. And he kept getting up, and he kept firing shots, and he kept taking shots. And I told myself when I left that night, I said, he's got it's different. Like, he got up. Like, he took some shot. Like, he got his ass rocked against a loaded Cedar Grove team. And he got up and dusted himself off, and he kept playing. And I thought, you know what? He checks boxes for me.
Mm-hmm. Last thing for you, Rusty, really appreciate your time, but we were talking a little off air. Big news for On 3, Shannon Terry acquiring Rivals.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on all that?
You know, it's funny. People said, I said, no, I didn't know. Like, I didn't know. I think it was in January, I think. I sat with Shannon at a dinner or something. I was up here, we'll try to have dinner, 4 or 5 of us. And
yeah,
I specifically remember talking about something. I was like, hey, when you buy Rivals, we'll do this and do that. And he just kind of like, kind of laughed me off, and I never thought twice about it. But when I go back, and now that I've heard the backstory, there'd already been conversations taking place, and I've said it a million times, the guy's 2 steps ahead.
Yeah.
It's always 2 steps ahead. Is he perfect? No. But is he successful most of the time? Mm-hmm. This one's different than the Scout acquisition because Scout was bankruptcy. We just bought them off. He literally bought them off the courthouse steps. And we just kind of absorbed Scout. This is what's good. If you want to be here, this is how we operate. If you don't want to do that, then you can go wherever you want. This is a different kind of animal. This is a very successful company, a huge national brand. I think that brand meant something to Shannon, obviously, and it's going to be interesting. I get a million questions like, how's it going to work? To me, I'm not really worried about it because I know he's got a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the initial talks as a brand, it's the best thing ever happened to Rivals because he is about to really invest back in that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was a case. I think Rivals was on cruise control, just to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Very successful, very profitable, but that energy and kind of what Shannon brings to those, like, attention to detail, I say it all the time. He's a good friend of mine. He will chew my ass out in a millisecond if he thinks I need it. And about once a year or every other year, I get one. And you know what? He's right. He'll call me and go, hey, get your blankety blank, do this, do that. I'll pout for a minute, and I go, you're right, and that's it. You know what I mean? And some people, they need that. Some people are not going to be able to handle him because you're not going to outwork. It's great to work for a company where you're not going to outwork the CEO. This guy goes to work at 5:30 every day, like 6 a.m. You know what I mean? I told this story a billion times. I think it's like 2011, 2012. We go out like a group of us, like 30 people, convention. We went out hard. Like we still had it hard. And I was leaving early the next morning. I was like, I had to do something at the office, the old 24/7 office. I roll up in there at like 6:45, got my chest bowed out. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be the first one to hear show these boys how I roll, I walk up in there and Shannon's got his hat on backwards and 2 big monitors. He's like, what's up, Rusty? I'm like, dude, 5 hours ago we were buying rounds. What are you doing here? And I knew right then to wave my white flag on him. Not going to outwork him. You're not going to out entertain him. But the main thing, I think, the message, and I've had very, I would say, intimate, private conversations with him multiple times. His goal is not to sell something right now. His goal is to build his legacy, his company. He's doing it with his son, Jack. He's doing it with his friends. I mean, I know I said something about Jack on the last podcast, but Jack Terry is super sharp. He's super driven. He, you can see that what he's got from his dad. Like, he sees it. A lot of times we'll call Jack with like, hey, we gonna do this. He's like, no, we're not doing that. And then Jack's right. And I'm like, damn, here we go again. I got another sharp Terry. But I think it's important for Shannon to build something massive, and he wants to build something to leave, and he's in no hurry this time. And I've had that conversation. I'm very confident now. If he sells it tomorrow, he lied to me. But
I don't anticipate that, and I rolled the dice with him to come over.
And I think everybody that came over with him to own 3, nobody's had any type of. It's different now. I mean, it's totally different because recruiting has changed. You look at the portal, and signing day is kind of like, hey, good luck, congratulations. But the portal now is so big. Like the portal window, like it's so big. And we got, got a guy, Pete Nakos, is just dominating that market. A young guy that's just killing it. And
only guy that I know that's been called out a vulgar term by the guy he reported on. It was 100% right. You know,
I text Pete that day, and I'm kind of that old guy.
Yeah.
And I said, Pete, you better be right on this one, brother, because you have stirred the entire college football is. And he goes, Rusty, I feel really good on my source on that. That's all I needed to know.
Yeah.
And then 36 hours later, it came out that Pete was absolutely right. And his dad had no, you call a guy a bitch, a grown man, like you know what's going on. You think you can control what's going on. But, Pete, and Pete didn't say, you know what Pete got? He got a raise.
Yeah.
He got a new deal. Pete didn't come out and go, F you, I told you.
Right.
He stayed in his lane. He did his job. And Shannon rewarded him because of,
those little things like that. And that's, you want people like that. And that was a wild. I was even nervous for Pete. I'm not going to lie to you because, man, that was a national story pretty quickly. And I'm having to answer for that. Like, because that's why I text Pete, like, you better be right, because I'm down here in Atlanta on TV, on radio. I need to know. Like, one last subject. Like, I did some radio, and this was last year at this time. And she was transitioning in, and it was all this controversy and all these, like, questions about Caitlin Clark. Well, I knew somebody close to that Indiana team. And I texted them, and I said, listen, before I go out on this radio and take up for this girl, is she really who I think she is behind the scenes? And the person replied, she is more than you think. This girl is an incredible teammate. She's everything you thought and 10 times more. I was like, that's all I need to know. So, when Pete told me he had it and it felt good, I was good then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the last thing I want to shout out, you mentioned social media and Jack Terry and Pete. Yeah, it's it's like On3 enters a space and they're dominating NIL. They're dominating, I think even now, the On3, the social media, it's almost like the standard of college football news.
And the graphics and stuff they do.
And that's out there for the taking for ESPN, but there's a void there. That's why I started this show. I mean, I think the SEC network could smash me in a heartbeat, but they don't, for whatever reason, they're not doing this. They should, but I'm going to do it while they're not.
You know what's the best thing I've ever told people? The Game Day doesn't do recruiting segments.
Yeah.
They're missing the biggest boat in the history of production.
Yeah.
All you have to do, if you're at Georgia and Tennessee, all Game Day has to do is do the top 5 prospects in town. They use ESPN rankings. Who's our rankings this week? You read down, these are the 5 guys in town this weekend. Just read their names off. They won't touch recruiting, which I am just floored. Thank God they don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're a prime example of people, and I say my term is people care. Quote unquote, people care. People love freaking college football, especially down here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that that some of those people kind of stick their nose up to it. Like we're not going to touch that. Glad you don't, buddy, because we're all in it every day. And the On 3, the Hayes Fawcett, those guys, and what our team does. And I said this on the last podcast, I believe. One last thing on Shannon is that Shannon has a million good ideas, and he has 500 that don't work, but he's not afraid to try those. And if he misses on them, we stop it. Like we're not doing that. But if you think about kind of his footprint, starting Rivals, and then when he started 24/7, one of the best things he ever did was do the industry composite rankings. It brought everybody here. Well, everybody probably told Shannon not to mess with that NIL evaluation stuff. Guess what he did? He did that on 3. Guess who owns the market? On 3. So, I remember sitting in his office. He had like 3 people at On 3. And he brought that up, and I thought, God, Shannon, please don't do that. Every college coach in America is going to call me pissed off going, because he's like, oh, we're doing it. He goes, oh, this is phase 1, Rusty. I was like, holy smokes, man. You know what? He was right. So, and that market is now huge. The portal market's huge. So when I say the brands between On 3 and Rivals has so much left in them, and that's where Shannon's gonna, to all of us together, we're gonna be under one umbrella. So I'm not even competing with those guys anymore. We're all doing this thing together. I'm excited about it. Excited to see his plan, and I haven't even messed with him. Hadn't really texted him about it. Asked him to go to Pearl Jam. He's so damn busy, couldn't go to Pearl Jam. So you know what? There was somebody in the office that jumped on that ticket. So that tells you how busy he is. I know he's got a million calls, but there's something for everybody to learn, and people always want to pick people's brain like that. Guy outworks you every day, 6 a.m. just about in the office, and comes in, doesn't BS. It's straight meeting to next meeting to next meeting, and I told my daughter some of the life lessons I've learned from people that are very successful is they're not afraid to fail, but they're afraid not to try. That's one of the things I learned. They're afraid not to try this. You're not going to hit on everything. I mean, Shannon's had some businesses that haven't worked. I know that. But the ones that he's been, fully engaged in, they've worked, and that's why I've stayed with him the whole time.
Yeah. Well, Rusty, thank you so much. Before you go.
Listen, man, we can't get... Is Cracker Barrel got him locked in yet? Speaking of, I need to be his agent, because I'm telling you, man, I can walk Shane into Cracker Barrel.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we can go into any Cracker Barrel in America. Within 2 days, I'm going to have his deal done.
The headquarters is right down the street.
What are we doing? Cracker Barrel?
They're missing out. You know what? He is their biggest fan, literally and figuratively.
Tell you something. And he's got his own space now. Got his own YouTube page. Oh my God, this would be like.
It would be great to mic him up and then just bring him into Cracker Barrel every Friday morning.
Biscuits and cousin. See, they already got a segment for it. I already got a segment for it.
But before you go, you got any deals going on at DawgsHQ?
I don't even know, but my what I tell people is just try us. If you don't, it's not for everybody, but if you come in and you want to, people that sign up are like, damn, I didn't realize y'all did all that. And I'm like, come on, man, and the space there is Georgia market is tough.
There's so many good people that cover it. You know what I mean? And I don't know, somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, but somebody told me other than the Yankees that Georgia may have more full-time credentialed people, full-time, that cover them right now. Wow. And I know why. I mean, they're winning and won national championships and all that kind of stuff, but I can't remember who told me that, but I thought about it, and I was like, damn, that might be true right now. There's probably 15 to 20 full-time every single day. I'm talking about full-time, 40-hour-a-week people that cover Georgia.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like my site's the best though, so I'm not trying to blow everybody up. So come by DawgsHQ, man, and we love to have your business. It's been great, and we got a lot left in us.
All right, I'll cut it right there. Thank you so much, Rusty. That was outstanding.